Hello and welcome back once more to the live broadcast here from the 2023 Sydney International Piano Competition. And joining me now is chairman of the Sydney International Piano Competition and somewhat a legend in Australia with Australian artists, Viriginia, Braden. Thank you so much for finding some time to talk to me.
It's a pleasure. Legend, I don't know.
Oh, well, I think you are in so many ways. As somebody who works a lot overseas with a lot of Australian artists, your name has come to my ears many times over the years. So it was terrific to actually meet you for the first time. You like to be called chairman, don't you, as well?
I do. I don't really believe in chair. That to me is a piece of furniture. It's always been chairman, so I don't ever see the need to change it. No, right. I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that? Oh, that's terrific to know. You, of course, have been assisting Australian artists for a long time, and you've been involved with this competition for a long time as a Sydney person, but also in your position here on the board. How has it evolved over the years, the Sydney International Piano Competition?
Well, it's changed, but surprisingly, the raison d'etre and the way it goes is pretty much the same. But I started in 1976. We had a 1 year to plan the whole thing from scratch, which was, a very big ask, actually. I don't think any of us went to bed before midnight any night for the whole year. But how has it evolved? I think after every competition, we obviously have an assessment to see, what we think worked or didn't work. But, it's surprising that the basic structure of the competition has remained pretty much the same. For example, we have less performers now, we take less competitors. In the first competition in 1977, we had 45, I think it was, and now we take 32. There are numerous reasons for that. It worked better with the schedule, but also money was an issue. And we were paying the airfares, full airfares and accommodation and per diems for everybody. And it just seemed, that we were having a struggle affording that as prices were going up. How else has it changed? Well, I think we've made a few changes in the area of the repertoire. Piers has been very smart about making it much more own choice, particularly in the first two rounds. There are some requirements, but basically it has opened up the repertoire. So instead of having, 20 Liszt Mephisto waltzes or something like that, we have a much more even spread and, interestingly, probably a much more varied repertoire. What else to say? I don't know. The number of jury has remained the same. The pianos, we have less pianos. When we started in 1977, we had, I think it was 6 pianos, but the logistics of it were incredible. Piers has refined the piano situation so that everybody gets to play or has to play all of the pianos which are on stage. But in 1977, people had an open choice. So the stage crew were moving pianos backwards and forwards, and it was quite arduous. So we very quickly had to decide we couldn't do that anymore.
I mean, that's over 40 years, of course, and what you've seen over the years. What sort of a role does the competition now play in Sydney musical life?
Well, I think it plays a big role. I mean, one of the innovations we've had, for example, is having the piano showcase, the little 8-minute piece at the very beginning of each session. And this gives everybody a wonderful opportunity to see what the next generation of competitors is going to be, or in the case where they're only 12, like 12 years old, like they were today. Of course, it might be 2 generations. But the role, I think, for me, is really for their careers, to develop their careers, to expose what the competitors can do, who they are, where they're coming from, and hopefully where they're going. And I think that's the big thing as a career development thing.
Well, and of course, this is one of your specialties, of course, because you've been an agent for so many, for over 150 Australian artists, from conductors to soloists to stage directors and all sorts of people. Do you think that they're getting the assistance and help they need, those Australian artists, when they go off to work on their careers elsewhere?
That's a very difficult question. The answer is probably not enough. They have to be terribly enterprising, and they also have to be very, very patient, because developing a European or American touring professional life is a very difficult thing. There is a fairly standard sort of arrangement between, say, artist managers in Australia and artist managers overseas, whereby we can share management of one particular or several artists. And this means that usually I was able to choose somebody with whom I could collaborate, so that the artist had some sort of support when they went to Europe. But Australia is a long way away, you know, and you realise that a lot of people don't really know what fabulous talent we have here. And it's a question of how to showcase them in Europe and America. And competitions, of course, are the best way, especially now when you can actually stream and people can watch. And I've just looked at that this morning and seen people from all over the place, Russia and Turkey and so on. They're all putting thumbs up on the streaming, which is terrific.
Incredible. One of the positive aspects of the pandemic, of course, is that we've taken that aspect of things much more seriously. Yeah?
Yes, although there's a real tendency for people to stay home in the winter by the fire and watch at home and not buy tickets, which is, you know, important.
Which is hard for me to believe, because we've got 22 degrees here and this would be a Berlin summer day, you know, so it's difficult.
This is true. Yeah.
Let's look a little bit more fundamentally, though, at that particular question, and what sort of environment does Australia need to create to make sure that this amazing number of talents that we have come through, that they actually get the nutrition, the musical, the artistic nutrition that they need to go on and have these careers that they need, we hope that they will have?
Well, obviously, I think the first answer is some more government support. Because establishing any kind of a career overseas basically requires money. On the other hand, you know, it is amazing what artists who are determined to do it can do for themselves, with management help from people here, with management help from people in Europe. Everybody tries the best to expose them to concert giving engagement, like orchestras and so on. It's a very, very slow process. But I've always actually believed where somebody is really hugely talented, they rise to the top pretty quickly. And it's surprising how much pianists know about who to ring up. You know, there's a network amongst themselves. But I would really love to see, I've always hoped that people like the Australia Council and for that matter, state governments would provide a little bit more money to support people when they go away. I mean, that in itself might be the subject of a competition. I'm sure it would be competitive to be able to be given those sort of grants. And there are some. The opera world has a lot of those sort of overseas travel scholarships. But I think piano is probably not high on the list.
No. And of course, Australia is renowned for its sports obsession to a certain extent. But what about those artists that are successful elsewhere and that come back? Do you ever experience anything like tall poppy syndrome in amongst the performers that you've taken care of over the years? Are they sort of welcomed with open arms when they come back?
I not always. I mean, for example, I've represented Stuart Challenger long ago, who was the second only Australian chief conductor of the Sydney Symphony. And it took a very long time for people to warm to him. Of course, once they warmed to him, they were very sorry when he died. Simone Young is another who took me a long time to get her back from Germany to get engagements here. And there's a kind of, you know, well, why do they need us attitude amongst Australians? You know, they've had a good career in Europe. Why are they coming home? But I can say honestly that I don't know one single Australian artist who doesn't want to come home. They all want to come home because, you know, it's where they know, it's where they love, and it's where they've grown up. You know, it's hard to know what the reasons for this attitude is. It's a bit sort of Australian. Oh, well, they've had it lucky, so why are they coming back?
Yeah. So do you think that perhaps Australians don't believe that we have the potential to grow these tall poppies to really create these wonderful artists? I mean, look at Barry Koski, you know, you've mentioned Simone Young, you know, there's...
Barry is also a client of mine, and he is a person who's completely really done it. I finally introduced, I had his world management for some time, and then I finally introduced him to a UK manager, and we swapped. I took Australian management and we gave away world management. But Barry's had a phenomenal career. And people want him to come back, but he doesn't have the time to come back.
Well, he's so busy elsewhere. He's had a phenomenal career, and he's been very innovative and really changed a lot of things and got opera back up there again, and in a way that sometimes I think perhaps only an Australian can do because of,
I agree
all sorts
with
of
that.
Yeah?
Australians have got, they can have sharp elbows where they need to. And they've also they go in, they just march in and say, well, what the hell, I'm going to do it. So there they are.
Oh, they also come from a different background to a lot of the Europeans. The sort of education that people get here and the sort of things that they're exposed to when they're growing up, be it the literature or be it the dance, be it the music, or also our environment, our this incredible, beautiful country that we come from. It all has an influence on all these people, and you actually feel it, of course, in their work and what they do, be it the writers or the painters or the musicians.
Absolutely. Well, they have to be very adventurous, and I think they just jump in the deep end, to be honest. I think is the way to go. You just have to be very, very brave and think, well, I'm going to do it, be determined to do it. But, writers, a lot of Australian writers have very good reputation overseas, but then they have got a calling card in their books. Whereas it's not so easy for an instrumentalist, say, for a pianist particularly.
Indeed. As you've observed this competition over the last 40-something years, I'm wondering if you could share a few of the moments that come back to you about some of the people you've heard perform that remain sort of in that special place in your heart, Yeah, it's probably too many.
There's so many,
so
yes.
many. Yeah, well, one or two, Virginia.
But one wonderful story was that Irina Plotnikova from Russia won the competition in 1977. It was the first one I managed. And she and I really always enjoyed each other very much. And I can always remember that she played, I think it was in the second round, a Haydn sonata, and I just thought, this girl's going to win. And sure enough, she did. But the amazing thing for me is that we've stayed in contact. And only last night we were WhatsApping. She WhatsApped. I won't tell you what her comments were about which pianist, but they were all pretty favourable.
Well, I think one of her students is here, though, I think, as well.
One of her students, but he didn't make it to the semi-finals.
Okay, right.
Tanin.
Okay, yes.
But she has been very impressed with the standard. Others, there were so many. André Laplante was a Canadian pianist who was also in 1977, came third, and I stayed in touch with him for a very long time. I don't know what's happened to him now. But then I got invited to the Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow in 1978, and he came third, which was a phenomenal exercise because the competition was very, very hot. But other things, oh golly, there's so many. I remember someone who shall remain nameless who didn't expect to get to the last round, the finals, and didn't know his concertos.
Oh no!
So the choice was, do you struggle through and try to learn it? In those days, we had a little bit more free time between the rounds of the competition, so he had a few days. But it was a nail-biting exercise because he finally decided he didn't want to be eliminated and that he would go ahead and give it a go. I know he was playing Brahms 1 and a Mozart concerto, and they're not easy.
No, not at all.
But yes. Knowing he was going to have a collapse, I was standing in the wings waiting for him, and he did. He actually, when he came off Brahms 1, he collapsed, had a sort of collapse because the effort of doing it.
Just getting that far.
Roger Cavell, who was the Sydney Morning Herald critic at the time, said that the Mozart was completely unrecognisable, but it was marvellous. So I don't know what that says. But that young man went on to have a very good career.
We, of course, have a really special aspect in this competition as well. A young fellow from North Queensland, Reuben Zhang, has jumped in at the last minute and made it through to the second round. It's really quite something, isn't it?
Amazing.
Incredible?
I heard him play and I thought, well, I'm probably not allowed to say what I thought, but I thought it was phenomenal.
Well, we're all you know, a homeboy. We're very happy about it.
I'm thrilled for him.
Yes.
And when you think about it, he just happened to have the repertoire that he could put into the competition. 1 week's notice is. Some of these players have probably been preparing for a couple of years. So that's fantastic.
Well, of course, you know better than anybody, of course, that this we're talking about, we're dealing here with players who, we're talking about decades of work. It's not just 1 or 2 years or you know, making a decision like this for a major competition like this. These people have been working most of their lives towards this moment, isn't it? And so makes it all the more special then to see them do well. And
well, you see that some of them are 27, 28, some of them are a lot younger, of course, but if you figure that they started learning the piano at 4 or 5, you know, just count up.
Yes, exactly.
And that's 8 hours of practice a day and a lot of lessons. If you do the statistics on it, it's really quite impressive, I must say.
Do you enjoy working with artists, obviously?
Oh, yes, I do. After nearly 30 years of my business, arts management, I decided that, you know, I should really not pass my use-by date. And I had 2 people who were very, very good working for me, and I decided that was the time to hand over the business, which I did do. I always missed it, but, you know, they're doing a very good job. The business is still going well, and, you know, I couldn't be happier, really.
Well, I mean, what a lot of people don't realise is as an agent, you're busy sometimes 20 hours a day because you're going to rehearsals and then you're going to concerts and you're dealing with all sorts of other aspects of that artist's career. And there's a lot of, I would think, unpaid hours in there as well. It's not an easy profession.
No, because it's sort of part psychologist, part social worker, sometimes
counselling.
Marriage counsellor, banker, you know, the ones that come and ask you if they could actually defer the payment of their commission. All those things are wrapped into one. So you have to have a character which, as a personality, which can accept all of that. And because I always had my eye on the international scene, and I was a member, indeed, the chairman of the International Association of Artist Managers for quite a long time, I was really, I suppose, able to see how other people coped with that as well. And I learnt a lot from my colleagues in the early years.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
Yeah.
Dedicated to music in the way that you are, it's interesting perhaps for you to tell us what you think the role of music and musicians is in today's world. We don't particularly have an easy time. We have, you know, lots of major things that we need to be basically confronting and looking at. What do you think music does for us and musicians should be doing for us, or what their role might be?
Well, I can't speak for other people, but I know that music does a tremendous amount for me. I think the biggest concern across all the music art forms is trying to encourage young people to be interested. And to, what's more, to come to live performance. I think one of the biggest problems has been technology. The device in hand seems more interesting than going to a concert hall or opera or ballet or anything, really. And how can you really teach young people about the fabulous things to do with the arts in general? And I think that is something which just challenges everybody. And I haven't got an answer, I have to say.
No.
It's really very, very difficult. Some are just lucky enough to have a family who encourage them at an early age to enjoy music and also to learn it, or even just to enjoy it or play it with the family. And others have a background where there isn't that at an early age, and it's hard to develop it. And I think the government also has some responsibility for this, because they're cutting down on music education all over the place. And some schools don't provide any music education. Others provide some, but not enough. And so how do the kids find out that they should, you know, develop an interest? It's very tricky. But then you look at the concert halls, and often very full, and you see people who are still adoring it and who would do anything. They would go through a snowstorm to come to particular concerts or opera. And then you know that it's still live and kicking. You know?
Yeah.
And I don't have any magic solutions, I have to say.
Well, no magic solutions, but a wonderful competition here, and we've had the great pleasure of being able to observe over the last days wonderful dedicated musicians, and so many of those musicians that you've helped through the years along the way. Thank you so much,
It's a
Virginia, for
pleasure.
talking to me today. It's been a great pleasure for me to meet you and to, be able to tell a little bit of your story as well.
Thank you.
It's rather remarkable.
Thank you.
And that was Virginia Braden, chairman of the Sydney International Piano Competition, Piano Plus. You've been listening to the live broadcast coming to you from the Sydney International Piano Competition 2023.